Yeah. You look good.
Well, I'm okay. You know what I have is a compassionate pregnancy weight. My wife is pregnant.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I've.
Is this your first child?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Are you ready for it?
I'm not ready. I'm very excited.
Okay.
I'm spending a lot of time on Google Scholar trying to research what I can learn about nutrition and child rearing to give my child potentially the best life she can have.
Yeah. You said you already know the sex of the child?
Yeah, it's 7 weeks now. It's 17 weeks, sorry. So we know that it's a girl. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, you know about the omega-3 and the brain development with, I'm sure you know about that.
Yeah. My wife is taking 10 grams of EPA DHA.
It's always good to do that because it gives them a good head start. You know, it speeds the development of neuronal synapses and all that stuff. So usually the kids that have had that, it's debatable. Some people deny that it's true, but when they've tracked the children that where the mothers were supplemented with omega-3, they actually did better in school right from the start. So there is a definite trend for omega-3 to help in brain development.
I did notice that. And I wonder whether it is the DHA after all, or whether it's also the EPA reducing the inflammation that the mother's enduring during the pregnancy.
I think, they used to say it was all DHA for the brain because, as you probably know, 40% of the brain is made of fat and it's mostly DHA, but the thing is they've discovered in recent years that EPA has a lot to do with it because, as you say, it has a greater effect on inflammation. And it also seems a little bit better for the health of the blood vessels.
Yes.
You get more oxygen delivery, and of course the neurons work better. So I think it's a combination of both, really.
Which brings us actually to our first question. So, Jerry, just to let you know, ahead of this discussion, what I did was I posted a picture on my Instagram, which I noticed you don't follow me by the way, and I would appreciate we will follow each other after this. I'll bully you into following me. But anyway.
I didn't realize I wasn't following you. Okay.
Anyway, so I posted a picture asking for questions for you. So we have a mixture of questions for you from the audience, as well as some questions I have for you. The first one, actually, you just brought up about fish oil. Someone asked, and I'm not aware of what he's referring to. He's saying that there are some recent studies showing that fish oil may not be as protective for cardiovascular disease as we originally thought. Is that true? Have you seen some studies like that?
Actually, there's been several studies that indicate that in some of the let's say the primary medical journals. And I actually I was annoyed when I actually read the studies to the extent that I actually wrote an entire article in my Applied Metabolics newsletter countering those and pointing out why those studies are inaccurate. Because for one thing, there's two problems with the studies. One of them was that a lot of the study subjects, were already eating fish several times a week. If you have fatty fish, mackerel, halibut, sardines, that kind of stuff. If you have that 2 to 3 times a week, you're probably getting enough omega-3 fatty acids where, if you take the supplemental, it's the equivalent of pouring water in a glass that's already full. In other words, that's the first problem. And the other studies where they found no effect, that turned out to be underdosed. They would give as little as 500 milligrams of the combined omega-3, which is minuscule. That's not even enough for a child. I mean, the therapeutic effects, for example, for cardiovascular disease, begin at 4 to 5 grams a day. If you the greatest dose I've seen in the studies that say that it doesn't work was 1 gram. Again, a quarter to 1/5 of the therapeutic amount. So Leo, I think I might have mentioned this in the past. It's easy to manipulate a study to get the result you want. I've always used in my writings, I always talk about the vitamin E studies where they talk about vitamin E being dangerous or it doesn't do anything. And then you find that very often, first of all, they give the wrong form of vitamin E. They give a synthetic alpha tocopherol, which is that's probably the cheapest, lousiest version. And the vitamin E family, as you probably know, the tocopherols consists of 8. There's 4 tocopherols, 4 tocotrienols. You really have to give them all to get the full benefit. For example, gamma tocopherol does things that alpha doesn't. Now, they always go to alpha because the main uptake carrier of vitamin E in the body kind of works mainly with the alpha version. So that's the only one that works. That's not really true. There's one called gamma tocopherol, which is much, much more potent than alpha, which is the one that's most commonly mentioned, in helping to prevent cardiovascular disease and prostate cancer, for example. So when they gave the vitamin E studies, what did they do? You know, it's a fat-soluble vitamin. You have to have some fat to absorb it. You don't need a lot of fat. A pat of butter would do it, you know? You have to get a bile secretion. So in these studies, they gave the study subjects a capsule of vitamin E with a glass of water.
Oh, interesting.
So it was underdosed. Usually it was about 100 units, which is, again, therapeutic effects of tocopherol begin at 400 units. 100 is not going to do anything. And you give it a glass of water, it's going to pass right through you. It's not going to do anything. So then they say, it didn't do anything. And then some of the patients were heart patients. Of course, the vitamin E wasn't helping them. But in the course of heart disease, sometimes it progresses naturally. Some of these patients got worse. Their heart, and they attributed it to the vitamin E. So they came out with all the popular media has these headlines: vitamin E is toxic. Don't use vitamin E. It should never be used. It's bad for your health. Yeah. It's garbage. Nonsense.
Okay, let's break this down. So this is a very interesting subject. Let's start from the top. So first of all, study design and understanding study design, of course, such an important element. You know, in grad school, I took a study design course and I was actually the manager of the behavioral research laboratory at the LSE. So I did designed studies for professors. And in the course of doing that, especially being in the social sciences and doing my own research for the National Institute of Health in London, I discovered that really you could design a study to get people to say anything you wanted them to say. Now, I was in social sciences, so obviously a little bit different, but still I know how to design a study to say almost any, to get something to be. So unfortunately, a lot of people don't realize that. And then so they read the abstracts and they read the headline on an abstract and take it. And that's why then we get this problem. Probably you have it on your page too, where somebody will respond to you and say, I have this one study that says the opposite. And they didn't even read the study. They just read the abstract. And of course, there's an abstract that disagrees with yours because of the study design.
Right.
The second thing is also, you mentioned the dose of fish oil. And this is something I always like to talk about with my audience because people seem to think fish oil is like an essential nutrient. It's not at all essential. Your body produces it, but also if you take 100 milligrams of fish oil, you're really doing very little. We're using it almost medicinally, almost pharmacologically to cause major changes in the body. And the amount of fat that you consume, I mean, when we think about the amount of fat, like for example, Jerry, tell me about this. So there's this gentleman, I'm just forgetting his name right now. He's in his 90s. He has very contrarian views in nutrition. And he believes, you know what I'm talking about? He believes polyunsaturated fats will cause so much rancidity and inflammation in the body. And he warns people not to use fish oil, which I always find confusing because, okay, say you're using corn oil or something. We're using a lot of oil. But fish oil, you're taking 4 grams of your total fat content. You're that worried about the 4 grams?
Right. Well, first of all, I don't remember the guy's name either, but I know who you're referring to. I've read some of his papers, and I always get a good laugh out of it.
Yeah, me too.
One thing you have to know right from the top is that this guy sells his own fatty acid supplement, and it doesn't contain fish oil. So he has an axe to grind. In other words, he wants people to buy his supplement. As soon as you realize there's a commercial interest involved, right away the skepticism bell has to ring.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. Second of all, he's only partially correct. Being a polyunsaturated fatty acid, I won't get into the chemistry, but I'm sure you know what that means. But it means it's basically very prone to oxidation. Any polyunsaturated, and fish oil is extremely polyunsaturated. So it's true, it is prone to oxidation. When you purchase a fish oil, whether it's capsule or liquid, I prefer the liquid because it's easy to take. If you take the capsules, the dose I take, I'd have to take 20 to 30 fish oil. I'm not going to do that.
Unless you go to Spring Valley, Walmart brand, third-party reviewed.
Right, the higher. That's right. Yeah, you can get the higher. That's true. That's an option. But the point is, when you get the fish oil, it has to be refrigerated right away. Do not leave it in room temperature because it does get oxidized. That is true. And when it gets oxidized, now that's another source of debate. Some people say that oxidized fish oil, oxidized polyunsaturated, actually has reverse health effects. It actually increases the oxidation of low-density lipoprotein, so it stimulates cardiovascular disease. Other people say that it doesn't really do anything, and I came across some very esoteric research years ago. Did you ever hear something like astaxanthin?
Yes. I know you like this.
I came across one study. I wish I didn't keep it. I wish I did. But according to this study, if you, let's say, for some reason you're ingesting oxidized fish oil, right? And a lot of the capsules are oxidized, especially the capsule. And you take astaxanthin, right? It actually reverses the oxidation of the fish oil. It turns it back into, let's say, live fish oil and completely eliminates the problem, see? So there's a partial truth to that. But I want to correct you on one thing. When you said that fish oil is not an essential nutrient. Now, what is essential? There's two types of fat that's essential in human nutrition. One of them is called omega-6, represented usually by linoleic acid.
Yeah,
linoleic acid is everywhere. It's just so many foods, meats, you name it. It's all you have to go out of your way to get an omega-6. The problem with most people is they get way too much omega-6 in contrast to omega-3. And the problem with omega-6 is when you get an abundance of it, this is, again, still another debatable subject.
Talk about the arachidonic acid.
Yeah, you have, of course, it's turned into, it's what you really need is arachidonic acid, and that's made from linoleic acid. Arachidonic is the actual real one you need. You could say that linoleic acid's a precursor. The problem with that is arachidonic acid can take different pathways. Some of them, unfortunately, are produce what they call inflammatory prostaglandins, which are associated with all kinds of pain and joint pain, you name it. All headaches, it's very bad. I have some research what I'm going to write for my applied metabolics. I've been putting it off for like a year. Because every time I want to write it, some interesting stuff comes out that I keep putting it back on the burner. But it's interesting because I have evidence showing, and this is going to blow people's mind, omega-6 is not nearly as inflammatory as every nutritionist, every so-called scientist will tell you omega-6 is inflammatory. I have evidence showing that it's completely, I'm not saying it's not inflammatory, but it's overblown. In other words, the notion that any amount of omega-6 will cause the production of inflammatory prostaglandins is greatly, greatly exaggerated. So getting back to what I was saying.
But briefly about that, it seems that there were three authors who I forgot their names, who really popularized that arachidonic acid prostaglandin danger thing. So it seems to have been overpopularized. Anyway, you continue. Sorry to interrupt.
No, there is something, there's some legitimate dangers to arachidonic acid, for example. Some of these, let's say, byproducts of arachidonic acid metabolism are associated, for example, with stimulation of prostate cancer and heart disease. So there's something to it. Don't get me wrong. But anyway, what I was saying is the two essential types of fat. One of them is the omega-6, represented by linoleic acid, mainly found in vegetable oils, that type of thing, corn oil, soy oil. The other type is omega-3. Now, the omega-3 that's listed as essential, strangely, is not EPA and DHA.
Yeah, it's alpha-linolenic.
It's alpha-linoleic acid, right? Yeah. And the funny thing is, alpha-linoleic acid, the reason you might say, well, wait a minute, if alpha-linoleic acid is only a precursor for the true omega-3, which is EPA and DHA, why is alpha-linoleic acid listed as essential rather than the other two? Because alpha-linoleic acid is available in far more foods. Omega-3 basically is limited to fish.
Yeah.
So in other words, they know that a lot of people won't eat fish, so that they say ingest alpha. You know what I'm saying? Because otherwise, people won't be getting omega.
Yeah, you have to get. It's essential overall. You're right. You just have to get the precursor at least. Yeah.
Right. Now, but the problem with alpha-linoleic acid is, again,
little of it is converted.
Right. Yeah. Depending on which textbook or paper you look at, it's anywhere from 2 to 10% conversion into EPA and DHA. So it's not really a great source of omega-3, strange enough. Now, there's nothing wrong with alpha-linoleic acid. It has some independent health effects on its own, but it's not. It doesn't give you the full benefit of the omega-3.
Which is why it's unfortunate that so many people are obsessed with the flaxseed. They pour a lot of flaxseed in their foods because I think it's because of the vegan influence.
That's
people are tempted not to want to use EPA and DHA, and they think that they're converting, but they're really not, and they don't realize that. Another thing you mentioned.
I just want to point out real fast: women, for some reason, are more efficient at converting. The real limiting one is DHA. You can convert a good amount of ALA into EPA, but DHA it's something like 1%. For some strange reason, and they think it might be due to the estrogen or something, women are able to convert much more of ALA into DHA up to 5 to 6%.
That's true. That's true. I remember. Yeah, Rhonda Patrick published on this, didn't
right.
she?
Right.
Because the she was talking about estradiol and serotonin, and then there was a DHA. I saw that paper too. Yeah. She has some nice papers that she wrote. They're very.
She did point out something interesting. She published a paper which I already knew about even before she published.
She does review papers.
Right. Exactly. Now, this paper that she published was had to do with the entry of DHA and EPA into the brain. She points out that DHA and EPA do not enter the brain efficiently, and there's a genetic a gene called ApoE4. It's called ApoE4.
Yeah.
If you have 2 copies of this, your risk of Alzheimer's disease is.
Which she has one, by the way. She has one copy, unfortunately.
Right. A lot of people do. Now, it doesn't mean. Huh?
You?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I admit, I'm afraid to know.
We say in Arabic, it's like Semitic language, al-baraka, so living on blessings. You're just going by.
I've been tempted to check it out, but I mean, if I have the 2 copies, it's going to like put me in some sort of anxiety. But the funny thing is, even though I know that even if you have the 2 copies of ApoE4, it doesn't mean that you're doomed to get Alzheimer's disease. Yeah. It just means that you're at greater risk.
But how does that have something to do with the DHA, huh?
Yes. DHA, if you can listen to this is shocking. If you can get sufficient DHA, I always slip and say DHEA, so I have to
me too. Me too.
If you can get sufficient DHA into the brain, the risk of Alzheimer's goes down anywhere from 47 to 72%.
Oh, I have not seen this.
Here's the problem, though. If you have the ApoE4 genes, even one of them. Now, if you have 2, forget it. But for some reason, these people cannot get DHA into the brain from fish oil.
Which is why she's obsessed with the phospholipid.
There you go. The phospholipids are able to get through the blood-brain barrier, and they do get in, and they do prevent Alzheimer's. So if what is the bottom line? If you know that you have the genetics or somebody in your immediate family, grandmother, mother, father, got Alzheimer's disease, it'd be a good idea to start taking something like krill oil or like you said.
Very high doses, though. That's the problem that people have to realize. Very expensive.
That's the problem. The problem with krill oil, it is slightly better absorbed than fish oil, but the doses of EPA are minuscule. You got to take like 20 pills a day. That's the problem.
Which is why I just superdose. But I didn't know about the ApoE4 part, but I just superdose. I say, hey, it's less absorbed, but I have so much of it. Some of it's going to get in.
Right. Yeah.
But I didn't know about the ApoE4 thing. One thing I want to mention really quickly about the Vascepa, which is the pharmaceutical EPA, is that most people are not storing those in their fridge. And that is an ethyl ester fish oil. And that has been shown to reduce cardiovascular events by 25% in 4 or 5 years. So even with that potentially rancid, oxidized 4 grams of EPA, it's still reducing,
Right.
Yeah, so it's a little bit overblown. Now, I got to ask.
Just want to real fast interject before I forget. That, you realize that the so-called pharmaceutical, the brand you just mentioned, are something like 10 times more expensive than commercial fish oil.
10 times more expensive, and it's not even the best form. It's not even a triglyceride. It's an ethyl ester form.
Just the words right out of my mouth. That's the really odd part. It's not even the best form of fish oil. No, people don't know that, though.
People want the prescription. I did it. I got the prescription, and then I was like, wait a minute, this is an ethyl ester. What am I doing?
Right. And the funny thing is, doctors don't even know the difference. Most doctors don't know. And, and a patient going to the doctor, let's say you have high triglycerides, there's a good chance that if the doctor has even the slightest knowledge about nutrition, he'll give you a prescription for this fish oil that you're talking about. And, the funny thing is, the patient has no idea they can get the same benefit at a fraction of the price by buying a commercial fish oil.
I'll do you one better. The worst part is this. The doctor and the patient both think that the supplements on the market have mercury in them.
Right.
And that's why they should take Vascepa. In reality, the reason it's ethyl ester is to get rid of the mercury. So the cheaper ones don't have mercury. I've never seen a third-party reviewed one that had mercury in it.
They're all what they call molecularly distilled. All the mercury, all the, the other chemicals like D8 something, there's another one. All these chemicals are completely gone. They're gone. Even the cheapest, crappiest fish oil doesn't have any of that. But I still see that. You're right. I still read articles all the time on the web. this is one of the reasons I have my newsletter, because there's so much garbage about nutrition out there. They'll say, "Oh, don't be careful of fish oil. It has mercury. It has these environmental contaminants from the sea that are, they're all in there. You're come on, you liar! Why are you lying to people? There's no commercial fish oil. Even the cheapest crap that you get at Costco or anywhere else, they don't have that stuff in there.
So true.
And they persist in saying this lie. Listen, Leo, there are so many lies in nutrition being spread. I still hear the stuff about eat only egg whites, egg yolks. I can go on and on and on.
Okay, wait. So we're gonna talk. I wanted, because the first time we ever had a discussion, which is now it's our fourth discussion. The first time I wanted to discuss the saturated fat, but now we have an audience. By the way, many of the audience members ask questions too, are subscribers of your newsletter, and they're all recommending the newsletter to other people. And I highly recommend it. I was subscribed for years. Now I'm too busy to read all the time, but it's a very, very good newsletter. I highly recommend it. But before we enter that, did you hear that Dave Palumbo has gotten thyroid cancer?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate.
You know about thyroid cancer. Basically, it's one of the most curable of all cancers.
Yes.
Basically, I've been on Dave's show. I like the guy. Don't get me wrong. But the thing is, I'm seeing these Facebook that pray for Dave. They're acting like the man is dying.
No, they don't know. Yeah, it's just cut it out. Yeah, it's
even Dave himself. When he did a video on it, which I saw, he's very calm about it. Dave went to medical school for about a year. He's got a pretty good knowledge of a lot of substances. I don't agree with a lot of things he says, but I do agree with some of what he says. But the point is, he knows himself that, if you catch it early, and I believe they did in his case. Yeah. See, the whole thing with cancer, let me give you in a nutshell.
Yes.
The thing with cancer is when you get it, when it's what they call in situ, in other words, in the original site, most cancers are curable. This is what doctors don't tell people. If you get them early, that's why they always tell you to, be aware of the early sign. If you get a cancer when it's what they call in situ, the original site, no matter where that cancer, breast cancer, prostate cancer, thyroid,
it's organ specific.
Yeah, it's much more curable, amenable to therapy like radiotherapy and chemotherapy and all that stuff. But
burn and radiate. That's right. What are the tools? They cut it out. They burn radiation and poison it with chemotherapy. There's only three things.
That's true. But here's the thing that they don't like to tell people, especially oncologists who treat people. Once a cancer has spread, let me put this: if you catch a cancer in the original site, the chances of cure are 90%. Right? Once the cancer has metastasized or spread through angiogenesis, other mechanisms from the original site to another, throughout the body, or to other organs, now the chances of cure goes down to 10%.
Exactly.
And the reason why cancers like pancreatic cancer are so fatal, pancreatic cancer is the most fatal cancer, because by the time they find it, it's all over the place and it goes to you're dead.
It metastasizes really quick. Is that what it is? And it's hard to notice.
Right.
Did you know that pancreatic cancers are quite associated with adrenergic signaling? So the more adrenaline having higher adrenaline levels is associated with pancreatic cancers?
I did not know
One of the few things but speaking of cancer in general. So first of all, about Dave's situation. Yeah, of course, absolutely curable. The thing that I have to message Dave because I don't know why he's thinking of doing this. So he has two sides of the thyroid and he has one side with the cancer, but he's considering only removing one side. Whereas me, I would just remove both, just in case it came on the other side. And also he was mentioning this radioactive iodine and all that. You would remove both, right? You'd be careful.
Well, yeah, but of course you realize when you remove both, that means you have to be on thyroid the rest of your life.
But you're probably going to have to be either way because it's half. It's not going to work well.
Yeah, you're right.
Especially for Dave, he's very low body fat.
Any way you look at it, he's going to be on thyroid the rest of his life. And they with cancer, the problem is what they call seeds. I'm sure you're familiar with that. Sometimes let's say they cut out a cancer, right? Let's say breast cancer, right? They cut out what they think is the main tumor. Unfortunately, there's little tiny bits of the tumor that remain that they can't even notice. These they call them seeds. These things have the potential to, again, turn into a full-fledged tumor. This is the real danger with cancer. This is why you hear a lot of people that, let's say, were cured of cancer, women who were cured of breast cancer, suddenly a year later, they're in stage 4 breast cancer and they die. What happened is the seeds that remained in their body became full-fledged tumors and they were very virulent and killed them. That's what happened, see? So the problem relating to Dave is that if this thyroid cancer, this relates to what your opinion about removing both, if it leaves some seeds in there that the surgeons can't get, that could theoretically not only get the other lobe of the thyroid, but it can spread, let's say, down to the esophagus, down to the lung, and can cause a fatal cancer. So I would probably agree with you, for safety's sake, to take the whole thing out, because let's face it, he's going to be on thyroid the rest of his life anyway. So what's the difference? And not only that, he probably will have to do something about the parathyroid glands that are also removed in the process. That adjusts, of course, calcium, phosphorus. That's going to be he's going to have some things to supplement that. But the point is that it's not that bad. I mean, Dave is a guy who takes insulin all the time because he does it prophylactically.
I know, the long-acting insulin at night.
To control his blood sugar. Now, me, I take metformin for the same thing. I wouldn't even consider taking. Even he takes a very low dose of insulin.
Long-acting, yeah.
But the thing is, if you know anything about insulin, I mean, I don't want to make Dave look stupid in any way. I think he's a very intelligent guy.
Smart, yeah.
I mean, insulin does other things.
You're playing with fire, real fire.
There you go. That's it. I mean, I won't go. Well, let's put it this way: insulin ages your arteries. Of course, insulin effect on fat metabolism.
I think it's the hormone. If you think of only one hormone, it's the hormone most associated with cancer development.
Exactly.
The one hormone, yeah.
Insulin has as it sounds, insulin has a direct relationship with insulin-like growth factor, which is known to keep cancers alive by preventing apoptosis of the tumors. Exactly. So, in other words, tumors actually produce IGF-1 to help them metastasize and spread along with angiogenesis. So the thing is, insulin, some of the effects overlap IGF-1 and vice versa. Just like IGF-1 can, as you know, attach to insulin receptors. So there's overlapping effects. So what you're saying is true. Insulin is kind of a semi-carcinogen.
And an even more concern is that if you were someone like, for example, for me, I use growth hormone for on and off, maybe total for a year of my life or a year and a half. But if I used growth hormone for 5 years straight, I would be very concerned, because the hyperplasia in the cells in the body means that every time my cells divided, there's a chance that there's some error in the DNA coding of the new cell. There's some mutation. And so there's only a certain number of times the cells can divide. And I've made them divide a lot more. So I'm actually older than I seem. So, for example, when I was watching a video when Dave was, and by the way, I'm talking to Dave about this all the time and, following his videos. So I was watching Dave in the thyroid with a thyroid doctor, and the doctor told him, he said, your nodule is this size, and he was giving him his risk parameters. And he said, you're below the age of 55. Now, Dave is 51. If I heard that, I would have been like, nope, I'm 60. Because I know my cells have divided a lot. So I'm actually higher risk. But in general, like if I knew my cells had divided a lot, I would really be careful about the insulin, using insulin. But Dave eats only half the day and stuff also. Right.
Well, an interesting thing, you bring up this growth hormone, it's kind of humorous that growth hormone therapy, of course, a lot of bodybuilders use growth hormone because it's anabolic, or they think it is. But it's kind of almost pathetic and ironic that you have this huge industry, this anti-aging industry, where people are going to these anti-aging clinics and getting growth hormone therapy, right? Now, if you're deficient in growth hormone, completely deficient as judged by, there's various tests to judge it, but
there is an actual deficiency of growth hormone. There are people that don't produce growth hormone.
Yeah, if you have that and you take the therapeutic amount, studies have shown people who've been on this for 25, 30 years, there's no increased incidence of cancer at all. That was the big worry about growth hormone, as you know, because again of the IGF effect.
Or the replacement.
So if you take this, but you will actually get the benefits of having growth. I'm talking about now completely deficient, right?
Yeah.
Now the problem though is a lot of people are not deficient in growth hormone. But they have this because of the 1990 Rudman study from the New England Journal, where they basically, they gave it a growth hormone to these men that were clinically deficient, and suddenly it turned back the clock. They started burning fat, they started building muscle, their skin got thicker, they had less wrinkle, and that's how the whole anti-aging thing began. And the thing is that what they don't tell people about that study is that when the men got off the growth hormone, everything reverted back, just like in Cinderella when the coach turned back into a pumpkin.
Yeah.
The men reverted right back to the way in other words, they needed to stay on the growth hormone. Remember, these guys were deficient, right? They weren't.
Oh, these were deficient ones also.
Yeah, they were deficient.
Okay.
All the men in the study were deficient. Okay. Now, if you give, but a lot of the people go to these clinics, they have this idea that growth hormone is going to keep them young. Mm-hmm. But if you look at the animal studies, I can't help. I'm sorry, I got it.
Nah, it's ridiculous.
If you look at the animal studies, growth hormone accelerates aging, exactly. And not only that, but the dwarf rats, the dwarf mice, I think they're called rats or something.
You talking about the Laron?
No,
those are dwarfs. No, you're talking about rats. The sprawly.
The Laron is another thing, but the thing is, the dwarf rats that are deficient in growth hormone live an average of 30% longer. Extended lives than normal mice, or I should say mice. And then you mentioned the Laron dwarf.
The Laron guys, the same thing.
People have a growth hormone receptor problem, or where basically they feel
the growth hormone.
Yeah. So what happens there is they never get cancer or diabetes at all. But, and this is again when people point this out, when doctors point this out, growth hormone's bad because look at the Laron dwarfs. They completely immune from cancer. They don't get diabetes. But you notice they're leaving one other thing out.
What?
Cardiovascular disease. They die of cardiovascular disease at average age 47. Why?
No, but they eat. Sometimes they die of cardiovascular disease early, or they die by accidents. I heard also, like that's car accidents and stuff like that. And then sometimes they live long.
Right. Well, yeah.
It's either the cardiovascular hits them, or they live a bit longer, or the accident.
If you look at most of them, they're kind of like beefy. They're very small, but they tend to be obese.
The heart and the brain need the growth hormone. This cancer. So it's always you're balancing between the heart and the brain and cancer.
You see, the thing is, what people don't realize is that IGF-1 is needed for the maintenance of neurons in the brain, and it's needed for the maintenance of cardiac tissue. In other words, if your heart is deficient in IGF-1, your heart degenerates, and you can get into what they call congestive heart failure. Mm-hmm. So you said exactly right. There's got to be a balance. You don't want too much. You don't want too little, right? Yeah. And let me further add, these bodybuilders, the bodybuilders that are taking 20, 30 units of growth hormone, they are that's when I read that, I shudder. Yes. Because I know what's going on in their body. You talk about cancer and accelerated aging, these guys are going to pay a heavy price, let me tell you.
So bringing that up, I mean, that's what I was going to ask you about also, was the fact, like, when I was watching also Dave Palumbo, where they had Chris Aceto was on, Chris Aceto had a stage 3 melanoma.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, Chris Aceto almost died from cancer when he was younger. So Chris Aceto was on, Dave had thyroid cancer, Tony Huge had skin cancer, and Lee Priest was on also, and he was talking about his back. He has a mole that's itching. He's in Australia though, so it's a bit different. But the point is, I noticed a lot of I don't know, we can't really tell, but it seems like there's a lot of cancer. Because think about it this way. If you look at the top bodybuilding coaches, the most well-known ones, only Chad Nichols and Hani Rambod have not had cancer that we know of.
Right. But how much of the drugs did they take themselves? Who knows?
Yeah, exactly. Well, they're the ones who used it the least. Yeah, they were not competitors as much. Yeah, exactly.
In other words, they could be telling the guys to use it.
Exactly. Whereas the guys who actually did use it, almost all of them got cancer, including George Farah, who almost died from colorectal cancer.
Right. Well, it's very hard to show a cause-and effect.
Of course.
But what you're saying, in other words, the mechanisms are there. That's the problem.
Definitely.
In other words, they're taking something, which let's say growth hormone, which definitely increases IGF-1. IGF-1 does basically help cancer, any kind of cancer. So there could be
beyond that. So growing the cancer as well as the cell division and causing the errors in the DNA replication and things like that, which is what I'm thinking of.
But do you know why cancer is predominantly a disease of older people? Is because as people age, the DNA replication becomes almost like they compare it to like a Xerox machine, copy machine. Like the first copy will be clear, but by the 20th copy, it's not as good. And that's what happens with cells. The DNA replication gets off, and what it does, it sets up the stage for DNA mutations. There's your cancer. That's why cancer is the disease of older people.
Exactly.
And also you got to throw in immunosenescence. As people get older, the safeguards in the body, like for example, T cells that normally would detect a incipient tumor, aren't working right. You combine the two, there's your cancer.
So yeah, that's unbelievable. You just described it so perfectly. So this is the idea I'm having, the image. It's like being in California where we live, and it's all dry. So it's perfect for a fire. That dryness is all those mutations. Now you have them all in your body. You're 40 years old. You quit bodybuilding, but you're ready to get a cancer. And then you take your growth hormone because you want to live long for some reason. And now your cells have that fire, that IGF-1. That's the match that lights the fire that can spread really quickly. And then about the immune part is the fact that in bodybuilding, I've noticed a lot of immune dysfunction because there's a lot of oxidative stress and inflammation that the immune system reacts to, but it keeps going. It's chronic. So we end up with people with, like, I have Crohn's disease, people have colitis, people have different arthritis, you know. So your immune system is already not vigilant and functioning properly.
Right. That's true. That's true. When systemic inflammation or inflammation anywhere in the body does dampen immune response.
Did you know that Laron actually studied MK677 in children? It's a really coincidental thing. Yeah, I came across, I was trying to study MK677 because people are asking about it. It's, the ghrelin mimetic. And I came across Laron had a paper on it, one of the initial papers in the 90s himself. Now, people wanted to ask you about your opinion. I know you have a strong opinion on this. So just I'll briefly say it for the audience. So there's a big, actually, it's not even a consensus in the medical literature anymore. In the last 10 years in the medical literature, there's like two separate consensuses involving meta-analyses. The question is whether saturated fat consumption or LDL cholesterol by itself, and not the ratio of LDL to HDL, is causally responsible for atherosclerosis and heart disease. And in the academic community in the last 10 years, there have been meta-analyses that show the opposite. There's an Iranian gentleman on the East Coast. I don't know if he's one of the ones who had the opposite but there's two big meta-analyses that show opposite results in the last 10 years. I haven't studied their study designs in that detail. I'm not an expert on it. So we know that. And then also obviously in the nutrition community, there's the book called The Sugar Fix, I think, by Taubes and Taubes, Gary Taubes. He did a lot of those things. So you're more of the view that Gary Taubes and people like that have, right? Right,
that's true.
Which is that saturated fat does not cause atherosclerosis, that it is a combination of inflammation and the nature of LDL particle size, which we've discovered from, what's his name, Ross? Is his name Ross? The author who talked about the LDL particle size and did the ion motility test for Quest.
I don't remember.
Basically, you're looking at the size of the particle and the triglycerides and the inflammation, right?
Right. Well, when you talk about LDL, you have to differentiate, as you just pointed out. You have type A, type B. In other words, LDL, which of course is low density lipoprotein. For people that don't know, this is the primary protein carrier of cholesterol in the body, right? Mm-hmm. This is what distributes cholesterol. Among other things, LDL carries cholesterol to the testes, where the cholesterol is a precursor for testosterone. Mm-hmm. In fact, people that have higher LDL actually goes with higher testosterone levels if you're not using testosterone. A lot of people don't know that. So the problem with LDL is it's dangerous when it's oxidized, because then it gets, when it's oxidized, immune cells called macrophages kind of like scoop it up. They become what they call foam cells, and that turns into an atheroma, which is and then becomes atherosclerosis. But here's the key though. It turns out that the large, what they call large fluffy LDL is much less prone to oxidation. When you eat a high-fat diet, right? Let's say a low-carb, high-fat diet, it promotes larger LDL.
Yes.
And in addition, it promotes increased HDL, high-density lipoprotein, which functions to remove, it's like a garbage truck. It takes the excess cholesterol from the blood, sends it to the liver, where the cholesterol is converted into bile salts. That's the only way the body can get rid of cholesterol. There's no such thing as burning cholesterol like you burn fat. It's the only way it can be converted. And then eventually the bile acids are excreted, blah, blah, blah. But the point being that when here's the odd part. So, let's say when you eat a high fat, let's say low carb diet, you have the larger LDL, which is less prone to oxidation, and you have an increase in HDL. Okay, what happens when you eat the high carb, low fat diet that's often recommended to prevent cardiovascular disease? What happens is the HDL goes down because it's stimulated by fat intake, and you get a greater preponderance of small, dense LDL, which is prone to oxidation. Now, why you say, well, what is it about the high carbohydrate diet that causes the production of a greater amount of small, dense LDL? The answer is glycation. The carbohydrates are basically combined with the LDL, the proteins in the LDL, and glycate them and cause them to become small and dense, then become prone. So what does it mean in a practical sense? It means that a high carbohydrate diet, especially refined, I'm not talking about good carbs like fruits. When I say good carbs, I mean carbs that have fiber in them. Fiber is the great neutralizer of carbohydrate. A carbohydrate that has a good amount of fiber is basically safe unless you eat a ton of it. Most people, the fiber will be too filling to do that. But a refined carbohydrate without, like the sugars and the processed carbs, high fructose corn syrup, without the fiber, that is those things tend to glycate. They will glycate the LDL, cause it to become small and dense. The bottom line is carbohydrates rather than fat are more dangerous for causing atherosclerosis. Just the opposite of what some of the American diabetes, just the heart association, the opposite of what they're telling people.
And so for the audience to know, the reason why this thought process began really was that in the 60s or 70s.
Ansel Keys.
Yeah, Ansel Keys, of course. But in general, there were basically a prohibition against eating fat. And despite the prohibition, people were still getting cardiovascular disease.
Exactly.
And so, and Ansel Keys is really the person who started this anti-fat crusade.
He had that, I can't remember, the 7 or 8 country study.
Yeah, he did.
Where he looked at the eating habits of something like
very ascientific research, actually. Very ascientific.
Right, but he looked at these 7 countries and he noticed a pattern where there was a greater rate of cardiovascular disease in relation to how much saturated fat. This is how the whole thing started. What they don't tell people is he examined many, many other countries that also had
selection bias. There was a selection bias too.
Exactly. Totally biased.
Well, even
20 other countries where they had a relatively high fat diet, but low cardiovascular disease, and he didn't include them. That's
crazy. But beyond that, even just these studies like what are they called? The green zones, the green zones, right? Even those studies, they never account for genetic factors. There's so much genetic. The Italians and Greeks and Japanese have FOXO3A genes and SIRT1 genes abundant, by the way, and people never talk about that. So there's
I'm sure you heard about that Italian village where one of this ancestor had a mutation where the people were producing extremely high HDL levels, and they just didn't get heart disease. And when the scientists
CETP gene probably.
What?
It's probably the CETP gene. That's a reverse cholesterol transport gene. It's awesome, yeah.
I don't remember it exactly, but I know that they tried to isolate the factor, that was protecting these people and giving them the high HDL. I mean, these people were eating all kinds of fat, which again disproves the whole thing. Here we go again, more evidence. These people were just shoveling in fat and all kinds of butter and stuff. No heart disease or cardiovascular disease at all, 0. So the scientists tried to isolate what was in the blood that was protecting them. They tried to make it into a drug. The drug was a complete failure. So in other words, it's obviously what they call a multifactorial situation.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not just this element in the blood. There's something else that's protecting these Italian people.
So let's talk about it. I mean, there's no question that there's evidence that this consumption of highly refined carbohydrates causes a change in the structure of the LDL molecules. And it's even intuitive for even just the listener to think that a smaller particle will be more likely to get lodged than a less dense, buoyant particle that can float in and out of your bloodstream. And that makes sense. But for me, in a practical sense, well, let's bring up 2 things. Number one, I just want to write them down so I'm consistent. Number one is the question of medication. Okay, number one, and number 2 is the realisticness of what I can do to be certain. So if I know let's start with number 2. So if I know my LDL cholesterol is below 70 and I know my triglycerides are not high, I probably don't even need to be worried too much about whether there's small or large particles, right? Because there's so little LDL cholesterol in my bloodstream, it's unlikely to get lodged at a high rate.
That's true. Below a certain point, it's meaningless.
Yeah, that's the approach I take personally, because I don't want to be risky. So I just want to be the less, So I don't consume refined sugars, but I also don't try to eat too much saturated fat because it does raise my LDL and I'm scared.
Well, it's like, you ever heard Nathan Pritikin?
I have, yeah.
He had basically started this kind of vegetarian diet. He was diagnosed with closures of 3 of the major arteries. The doctors who examined him told him he had 6 months to live. He was he was a self-taught engineer or something like that. And he said, bullshit, I'm going to research this on my own. And he came up with the idea of, it's a long story how he came up with it. He came up with this idea that cutting out fat and going on a plant-based diet will reverse atherosclerosis. To make a long story short, it worked. In his case, when he had imaging studies later on, he no longer had the blockages. So that's how the whole Pritikin thing started, right? Now, what he said, though, this is what I was leading up to, is he made a statement once. He said, if your total cholesterol is 150 or less, total cholesterol, you are not producing atherosclerosis in your arteries. It's not happening. It only happens when it goes over 150.
That could be the case. I've been trying to rely on the LDL number alone, which I understand. Now, by the way, my total cholesterol is over 200, right. But my total cholesterol is weird. It's like it fluctuates, but it's over 100 HDL and between 50 and 70 LDL without medication.
Yeah.
But with citrus bergamot, which may be doing some kind of cosmetic superficial raising of HDL that I'm not aware of. You know what I mean? Yeah. But now here's the question, right? So I wanted to talk to you about these wonderful new medications that have come in cardiovascular disease, the bempedoic acid, the PCSK9 inhibitor. There was another one I wanted to talk to you about also. But let's talk about this. So first of all, statins. Now the statins have been a large part of the reason why people think that LDL cholesterol is the causal factor. And it's because statins reduce LDL cholesterol and reduce cardiovascular mortality. But they also seem to do other things because they lower C-reactive protein and they heal the plaque, calcify the plaque. So there has been a question, and I'm sure you're aware of this mystery of the pharmacology of statins. Maybe they're doing something else that's actually protecting people, not just the LDL. But then we have the introduction of the PCSK9 inhibitors, which reduce LDL by over 50% on average. And they reduce LDL in some studies to 15 milligrams per deciliter, which is shockingly, the reduction from like normal 70 to 80 to 15 actually reduced cardiovascular mortality and didn't increase side effects in those studies, making you think that this physical lowering of the LDL, and the weird thing about PCSK9 is that it doesn't seem to improve C-reactive protein and doesn't seem to improve calcification or increase calcification. So the thought is, that's, again, lowering LDL. And then you have bempedoic acid also. Lowering LDL, improving C-reactive protein, less side effects. But again, impact on cardiovascular mortality is sort of similar to ezetimibe.
Yeah.
So you have a bunch of medications that they're all consistently lowering LDL in general. Obviously, they're lowering small particles also. But so I guess that's sort of the approach I've been looking at, feeling like LDL is a demon. Maybe there's a good LDL and a bad one, but in general.
Well, first of all, as far as the statins go, they now believe, most pharmacologists believe that the primary preventive benefit offered by statins is not so much lowering of the LDL, but rather lowering of arterial inflammation,
yes.
which is actually the underlying basis of atherosclerosis. In other words, if you reduce the localized inflammation, there's no atherosclerosis. So they take statins. Actually, that's the main reason. It's not so much lowering the LDL. Second, when you talk about statins, you have to talk about some particularly pesky side effects.
No, for sure.
Statins have some liver effects. They can adversely affect the eyes, and worst of all, from somebody involved in exercise, they definitely lower testosterone. And also, when you work out and you take statins, there's increased muscle damage. And the reason for that is because statins interfere with the production of coenzyme Q10 in the liver. It's called the mevenolate pathway. When statins work by they inhibit HMG-CoA reductase, but that's also involved in the production of coenzyme Q10 from tyrosine. The coenzyme Q10 is protective of muscles when you work out. So without sufficient coenzyme Q10 and you take statins, you're causing a
Myopathy,
tremendous amount of muscle damage. So again, if you're working out, this translates into no gains in muscle size and strength, and coupled with a drop in testosterone. Statins are absolutely awful drugs for anybody involved in it. Awful drugs.
Except they do have one benefit, Jerry, which you're not telling the audience. You're hiding it. They improve erectile quality acutely. They do. It's a weird side effect. I don't know why it happens. No one knows why it happens. I don't know if you ever tried it, but it does work.
I have a suspicion that but listen, you have to understand, when you decrease a localized vascular inflammation, you know what's made in the endothelium, what's produced in the endothelium? Nitric oxide.
Yeah, that's true.
How does Viagra or Cialis work? It increases cyclic GMP, which increases
that makes a lot of sense.
Right, it increases localized production of nitric oxide in the corpora cavernosus of the penis. You get an erection, right? It bypasses a lot of the reason why men have erectile dysfunction is with diabetes, is that the blood is not getting in there. To get an erection, you have to have trapped blood in the spongy tissues, and the way you get the blood in there is the dilation of the local small blood vessels. What does that? Nitric oxide. That's why all these what is it? Is it 5-alpha or 4-alpha phosphodiesterase drugs like
PDE5 inhibitors like Cialis?
Yeah, Cialis and the reason they work is because they agree. So again, if you have statin lowering the localized inflammation of the blood vessel, you're going to have the blood vessel could possibly heal. Now you're going to have increased production of nitric oxide, and you have blood vessels in the penis too.
Jerry, you really taught me something today. I've been wondering why this is. I really have been wondering. Okay, but so if statins have such bad sides, so statins, okay, just for the audience to know, the most major thing other than the myopathy and the brain fog, which is severe in many people, because many statins pass the blood-brain barrier, and not all of them do. Like rosuvastatin doesn't, pitavastatin does. Many PCSK9 inhibitors, though, don't pass the blood-brain barrier. There's no evidence of neurocognitive effects. Yeah. There's no evidence of calcification. There's no evidence of an increased incidence of diabetes in addition to statins, though I'm not sure if I've seen it as a monotherapy if there is an increase. Right. There's a few other interesting things, like, for example, it reduces lipoprotein a, which is the only tool so far that other than niacin.
Yeah, that's true. Well, that is there. Other than niacin, it's true. There's nothing else and having elevated lipoprotein small a increases the chances of a massive heart attack 5 times above normal. Yeah, let's bring that up for the audience. Most people don't even measure it. Yes, most people don't measure it. When you get your normal blood lipid labs tests, they don't measure lipoprotein A. In other words, you have to have what they call the Berkeley heart test, which measure a whole bunch of other things like fibrinogen, small lipoprotein. Yes. I mean, most people, they'll see like, oh, my cholesterol's good, my HDL's all right, my LDL's okay, I'm okay. Not necessarily true. Yeah, let's comment on that for people. Like, always check your homocysteine when you do your cardiovascular. Independent risk factor and then check your lipoprotein. It's called a. It has an A in brackets with a lowercase. That's what Jerry's talking about. They don't test that. You just test it once in your life to see if it's elevated, because it is it seems to be as significant a factor in cardiovascular disease as smoking. Right. Yeah. So, no, but getting back to the PCSK9, the problem with them right now is I don't know if you know this, it's an exorbitantly expensive drug. Of course I know this. I've been trying to, It's very, very expensive. I'm up to. I'm trying to get drugs. I mean, it does what you said it does. Don't get me wrong, but it's very, very, I am not familiar with the way insurance companies, I don't know if it costs $5,000 and you will not get it from an insurance company unless your total cholesterol is over 300. Okay, so right now I look at it as a little bit on the impractical side. Yeah. the other thing to consider is that when you talk about LDL of 15, there's something's going to happen at that point. I mean, there's a point where it's like not good, where it gets too low. You would think, but in that study there was no additional side effects. But look at it this way. The LDL is what carries the cholesterol. No, I know. There must be something. It's just a limited study. I guarantee you, if you take that drug, and I'm just guessing, if somebody takes that, a man, let's say, who's working out, takes that drug, I guarantee you that within a short time, when he takes a testosterone test, if he's not taking testosterone, he will have the value of a 9-year-old girl in testosterone.
I have to check that out. But look, also there's one other concern
I
with
know because it happened to me.
Did you from the PCSK9 or from statin?
No, it wasn't from the cardiovascular. Somebody sent me a pro hormone supplement years ago, and it was supposed to be not affect the HPTA axis, but it did. It turned off my testosterone. I had testicular shrinkage, and when I went and had my testosterone tested, the doctor told me I had the testosterone of a 9-year-old girl.
Of a 9-year-old girl.
Yeah. So,
one concern though about PCSK9 inhibitors is they may limit the absorption of the fat-soluble vitamins that we started this discussion about, which is the vitamin E.
Very dangerous.
So let's talk about vitamin E briefly, because again, now I'll caveat this with the fact that I did look at those studies and I did not study the study design because I had limited time and I was being introduced to the subject. But there are studies with vitamin E, and the most concerning ones that I saw weren't actually about cardiovascular disease. They were about lung cancer. I think you've seen those too, which is they added vitamin E, which was the alpha tocopherol, and they saw an increase. I think it was like 400 milligrams, something like that.
Well, let me ask you a question. Were the subjects in that study smokers?
The subjects were smokers so that's the reason. It's only when smokers.
This sounds a lot like the beta carotene study a couple of years ago, where men taking beta carotene was shown increased incidence of lung cancer.
Yes, it happened with beta carotene too.
And they were all smokers, right? Now, the closer
beta carotene, absolutely. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
This is very similar to what you're talking about the vitamin E, because smokers involved. As you know, smokers create smoking creates a tremendous amount of oxidative byproducts in the body. Also, when you take an isolated antioxidant like beta carotene or alpha tocopherol alone, and you combine that with a heavy oxidant like smoking, now you turn the nutrient into a pro-oxidant, not an antioxidant, a pro-oxidant.
You can turn it to a pro-oxidant. Good point.
And when it's taken in isolated form, so now you do get a stimulation of the cancer. Now, here's the deal. Let's say you give not just alpha tocopherol, but you give the entire tocopherol family, the tocotrienols also, including gamma tocopherol. You give it to smokers, it's not going to happen because the other forms of tocopherol, or let's say even better, you give them a nutrient like, for example, what's it called again?
Sulforaphane?
Lipoic acid, which has the ability to convert other oxidated antioxidants back into their antioxidant form. If you throw in lipoic acid, it will convert the oxidized vitamin E back to the antioxidant form, and it actually helps. It has a reverse effect. It helps to prevent cancer.
By the way, I add alpha lipoic acid to all my free radical scavenging supplements. I take them 3 times a day, and I always add alpha lipoic acid for that reason.
What's the dose? What dose do you use?
I use 600 milligrams.
That's a dose for treating neuropathy.
Yeah, I take that, and I take 1 gram of So I should say this for the audience. It's because of my Crohn's disease and because I want to focus sometimes, and oxidative stress really harms focusing and concentration. So sometimes I take 1 gram, which, by the way, NAC in double-blind placebo-controlled studies shows an antidepressant effect because of its lowering of neuroinflammation. So I take 1 gram of NAC, 1 gram of glycine, 600 milligrams of alpha lipoic acid, 3 grams of EPA, and 1 gram of vitamin C. On an empty stomach 3 times a day. And it has a great impact on my mood, my focus.
I'll tell you myself, I've had about a year ago, I started getting this weird feelings in my hand where some of my fingers were kind of numb, and I suspected some sort of neuropathy. I said, because I am pre-diabetic, but I control my blood sugar very well. And I said, how can I have neuropathy? I don't have high blood sugar. And I went to a neurologist. He wasn't really sure what it was. But he mentioned something I already knew. He says, do you take alpha lipoic acid? I said, I do. He says, why don't you increase your dosage to 600 milligrams? Because I knew that was the dose they use in Germany to treat neuropathy. So I said, well, I got nothing to lose. I'll try it. And guess what? All the dead feelings disappeared except in this finger, the pinky. I still have a little bit of numbness in the pinky. All the rest of all of it's gone. All the dead feelings. Incredible. So they tell you that nutrients don't work, I give them this finger.
No, that's the thing, Jerry. I always hear that, especially from bodybuilders. They're always saying these supplements don't work. I'm telling them, listen, I don't take 30 supplements a day for no reason. It changed my life.
Oh,
My quality of life is completely. You can't get this on
you
food.
know what? That to me is that there are certain subjects that are just are so ridiculous that to debate them makes you look foolish.
I know. Yeah.
One of them is supplements, and the other one is, for example, was Trump a great president? I won't debate people that stick up for Trump because it's so absurd by this point that I cut them off. I won't talk to them because they're not living in a world of reality. So I just walk away.
Hey, do you feel in a better mood now that Trump is gone? Do you feel better?
Oh, I certainly do, and I'll tell you why. Because if Trump got reelected, he had already announced what he was going to do. He was going to raid Social Security, which I have Social Security. He was going to raid Medicare to pay for that huge tax break he gave to the rich, and he was going to get rid of pre-existing condition coverage in health, which I also have. In other words, Trump would have been almost a death sentence to me. Am I happy he didn't get in? You're damn right I do.
It was Trump versus Jerry.
Yeah, I know. And listen, I judge people. I'll tell you how bad it is, Leo. I never have done this in my life. I actually judge people by how they feel about Trump. Man or woman, if I meet someone and they talk about how, it's horrible, they stole the election, but right away, my opinion of them drops down to zero. I don't want to know them. I don't want to talk to them. No matter what their other qualities are, that's automatically canceled.
But Jerry, have you noticed something? When in the 90s and the 80s, the Democratic
By the way, a lot of people who are watching this are going to hate me for saying
No. They comment sometimes, but it's okay. Yeah. You also have people who are liberal who like it, and don't worry, it's all right. It's all right. My channel, everyone says what they want, but I want to tell you, Jerry, did you notice that in the Democratic Party used to be the party that wasn't aligned with big business? It's funny now in the U.S. both parties are aligned, so we don't really, it's weird. They're both representing the big business. I mean,
see, the problem is that you're right. That's true. It's a big business involved, but the Republicans, to me, from what I could see, are much more blatant about it. In other words,
they are more blatant.
They don't care about their constituents. They like Ted Cruz. I mean, this guy goes to Mexico, it's sunny 85 degrees, while the people that he represents in Texas are having icicles come out of their ceilings and freezing to death.
But you got Cuomo also. Cuomo did they're all doing crazy stuff, these guys.
They're all doing crazy.
You can't trust these people. Look, anybody who wants to be a politician is a suspect person.
Right, they're power hungry.
Yeah, it's not a good person. Doesn't want to be a politician.
Well, have you ever wanted to be a politician? I never have.
No, why would you? And why would I think that I am deserving to be the president? Just to think that is ridiculous.
Not only that, but when you're a politician, you have to be prepared. Somebody will always hate you, no matter what you do or what you represent. Somebody will always hate you. And do you really want to be in that position? I don't. No thanks.
That's
hate me as it is because of what I say about Trump, but that's too bad.
Well, not in California. The reason is because in the weightlifting world, people are more conservative, I think, than in the normal society.
Oh my God! Let me tell you, Leo. Now that you mentioned that, I have known a lot of these people I've known for 40 years in the bodybuilding world. I'm not going to mention names. They were such staunch Trump supporters. I was shocked.
Yeah.
I thought these people were far more intelligent. And when I saw the way they were raving about him, I actually blocked them on Facebook.
I've heard you're very active on Facebook.
I couldn't. And some of these people I considered friends. I just couldn't take it. I was shocked. I would never expect this. Honestly, that caught me by surprise. I never expect these people to support a guy like Trump. I was just, a racist, a hater, a liar.
Do you really think he's racist? Like genuinely racist? Because it's different to say you don't want immigration and genuinely racist. Because, for example, let me put it this way, Jerry. I often, especially when the BLM stuff was happening, there were a lot of interviews on different channels on YouTube asking other African Americans, like, what are the experiences in your own life that have been racist toward you, And some of them have said, I feel like I didn't get a job one time, or I feel like this happened. I was surprised in a lot of these interviews. I never heard one of the people say, hey, I was called the N-word once or something. I was. In downtown LA, walking downtown LA, I was called a sand N-word by actually a black guy. The funny thing is, across the street, I've been chased around stores. I've had security follow me around stores because of my tattoos and because I'm Arab. I've had in the airport, you can't imagine. They think I'm a terrorist every time. I've had jobs, because my Arabic name sounds Arabic, so people don't want to. I've had so much racism in my life, and I'm not that touchy about it. And when I look at Trump, I mean, if Trump was going to be racist against anyone, it would be me because they're Arabs and Muslims, right? I don't think he's genuinely racist.
I don't think he's as virulent a racist as often portrayed. Yeah. But I think he has some racism in it.
Nationalism, you mean?
Yeah. Well, no. In other words, for example, his father attended a Ku Klux Klan rally.
Really?
His father was definitely racist, and I witnessed this myself. Because when I lived in New York, I lived in an apartment building, and it was actually Fred Trump. That was his father. This was his original real estate property in New York. It was called Shorehaven Apartments. He built them. He got money from the government to build housing for GIs returning from World War II. So he built these huge apartment buildings in a section of Brooklyn. I was living there, and they had a rental office, right? Mm-hmm. And I was a kid. I was very young back then, and I knew when there was vacant apartments, I could see it. You know what I mean? Mm. I'd see black people come in the rental office, and they'd leave like 10 minutes later, and I used to say to myself, how come I don't see a single black person? I mean, there was like 20 buildings, not one black person. And then I would see white people go in that office, and maybe a week later, I'd see them coming out of the apartment building, meaning that they took the apartment. And I found out later on, well, actually, I didn't find this out till recently when it came out when Trump was running, that Trump and his father was sued for racial discrimination for not renting apartments to minorities, and they paid a fine without admitting guilt. That's what happened. No, but they were actually sued by the government for doing that. No, you could say, well, wait a minute, that's his father. You can't say that about. Well,
also, but the reason they may have been doing that is simply because of money. They may, sometimes, like for example, let me give you an example, Jerry. Yeah. When I moved to Pittsburgh to go to Carnegie Mellon, I asked, where do the Jews live in Pittsburgh? So I found out the Jews live in Squirrel Hill. So I moved to Squirrel Hill. Why? I want to be safe. I know my Semitic cousins, they're careful. There's not going to be any crimes here. So I'm going to go live there. So maybe what they were doing is trying, maybe some people, they don't want to live in the building if they see other races. So, but I understand what you mean. I know what you're saying.
Here's more evidence. You got to think back. Do you remember when Trump made his speech about how the people coming in from Mexico were racist and the drug dealer? He didn't.
That classification. I think that's what did it. Made people come.
He made this broad classification that everybody coming from Mexico was some sort of low-life piece of garbage. That in truth, I can tell you, living in LA where they have a lot of illegal immigrants, most of them are very hard workers.
No, we know that. We know that living in LA.
They're not bad people at all. I see them all the time. Right now, then you talk about Muslims. Look at the way he banned entire what is it, a race, religion, whatever you call it.
Yeah.
He banned an entire every Muslim is a terrorist. The implication of what he did, he was saying every Muslim is a potential terrorist, so I'm not letting him in this country. That is racism. Come on.
So I just have to play devil's advocate for you. So one thing. The Mexican part, I agree with you. It's a very obvious living in California and across the U.S. that most of the Mexican immigrants are very hardworking people, sacrifice for their families. I mean, they really live the original American work ethic, which is what we were built on. But now I am half Arab. I'll tell you one thing, though, honestly. When Muslims immigrate to countries in Europe, you do see more terrorism. And the reason is because most of the refugees are leaving from a war-torn environment. So they come with a war-torn mentality. So whenever you take in refugees, the reason why it's such a good thing morally is because you take a risk. You're letting in these people into your country that you have to pay for them from the state. And there is a risk, they may adapt to your country. They may not, like in Sweden. There's a lot of, in Sweden. But anyway, we'll leave this aside for a second.
I just had one more thing. Look at the most recent cases of domestic terrorism. Were they Muslims?
No, that's true.
They were white.
That's true.
So I mean, in other words, all I'm trying to say is what you're saying is true. Of course, there's a lot of bad people that come into the country, and they are terrorists. but you can't generalize. Some of these people are trying to escape horrible living conditions, or they're being assaulted by gangs and terrorists themselves. They're trying to get a better life. You can't label everybody a garbage terrorist or this and that. You can't do that, because that is racism.
But Jerry, imagine this. How about this? Like, think of the idea that, say, in the US, we have the opportunity. Now, in the US, I know because I lived most of my life abroad. Most people in the world want to live in the US. Like, you'd be surprised, even Europeans, French, Americans, they'd love to live in the US. But we have the most ridiculous way of immigration. It's called the lottery, for God's sake. Instead of choosing who we let in, we have a lottery, which means just random, just whoever. Why don't you not do that? Why don't we select? Like, for example, like after World War II, we took in some of the most intelligent Jews around the world. And just that event changed the course of US history. The reason why we were in the late 20th century was because of those Jews immigrating from Germany and all these other places that brought the scientists, the knowledge, the work ethic, the capacity. So I feel like, no, I'm not disagreeing with you at all. I just feel like we should choose sometimes the most valuable potential immigrant in society.
Funny that you say that, because that's what Trump said himself. He was willing to let in immigrants that gave something to the country. In other words, if they were established scientists or teachers or had an advanced education, he was saying, come on in. But everybody else, no.
But, Jerry, that's another.
That's wrong, because not everybody, could attain that, let's say, type of education. Some of these people are good, hardworking people. They're not criminals. They just want to have a better life. And to say you can't come in because you don't have some specialty about you, that's racism and prejudice. There's no other way around it.
I see what you mean, Jerry.
I see your point, but I mean, I
see your point too. I know if you want to be totally charitable and not charitable, but if you want to give people, if you want to live the best ethical life in the moment, you don't turn your door away from somebody that's in need. Yeah, but at the same time, you could think, if you know what I mean? Yeah, I see what you mean.
Look at the poem on the base of the Statue of Liberty in New York. It says, give me your tired, your hungry.
That poem, yes. That poem, unfortunately, is completely against what I'm saying.
Right.
Yes.
It doesn't say, give me your top scientist.
It doesn't. I know. That's totally against that. I know.
Let's just end it at that.
Yeah, you're totally right. One last thing, Jerry. The thing is, like, I actually wrote down questions. To be honest, this happened the first time also. We've gone through a quarter of the questions. So what I want to do is, I want to ask you if you come on within 2 weeks, so we can just continue the same questions. But I want to ask you one last thing right now, which is important, and I think the audience will be interested in. So Dave brought on somebody who was the gentleman he brought on the show is like I don't know how to describe it, like a spiritual healer or something like that. And he was talking a lot about this two subjects. One was the value of pancreatic enzymes. Okay, which do have value. I've seen, for example, studies showing a change in the diversity and the quality of the microbiome in people that take, or not people, rodents that take pancreatic enzymes. But other than that, I haven't seen anything. This gentleman was claiming sort of like huge health benefits to taking pig pancreatic enzymes. The second thing he was claiming was, what he was not claiming, but his interest was in this alkalinization subject. Can you comment on these two, maybe especially the alkalinization? That's really what I wanted to get to.
All right, first of all, as far as the enzymes, one of the first articles I did when I started my Applied Metabolics newsletter was about digestive enzymes. It's basically the same thing, pancreatic enzymes. And in the course of the article, I mentioned that the body produces over a quart a day.
Yes.
I forget whether it's a quart or a gallon. It's a huge amount of pancreatic enzymes. So they do have a use in certain digestive diseases where your body is not producing enough of these enzymes. They are absolutely essential, right? For most people, though, it's superfluous. I will admit in the past, I used to keep a bottle of digestive enzymes around. If I ate too much, I used to have this thing when I was on diets, like low carb. I'd go off once a week and I'd stuff my face, I'd just eat like crazy. And I'd hopefully get bloated and uncomfortable. I would pop a couple of digestive enzymes to hopefully, ease the bloat. I did that years ago, but for most people, the digestive enzymes are just not necessary. Again, it's a situation of pouring water into a glass.
I agree.
Now, as far as the alkalinization, This I also wrote about in my Applied Meta. I had a huge article explaining the whole controversy and the truth about it. And if you know anything about the way the body controls pH, which is the balance of alkaline and acidity, it's very, very important that the blood maintain a certain level. I believe it's 7. I don't remember exactly. A certain alkaline or acid balance, right? Mm-hmm. If it goes to below a certain amount, you have a medical condition called acidosis. Yes. This is the problem, for example, with diabetics who are uncontrolled. They get something called ketoacidosis. Yeah. Now, ketones, of course, are byproducts of fat metabolism. They're very famous now. Years ago, nobody knew what ketones. Now everybody knows what keto, because it's, the ketogenic diet. Ketones basically, I won't go into the whole physiology, but they are, what people forget they are metabolic acids. The amount of ketones you produce on a ketogenic or low carb diet is not dangerous at all. It's actually beneficial. However, in uncontrolled diabetes, you have the situation where it gets out of hand, where you get tremendous amount of ketones. They call it ketoacidosis. The danger of that is they are metabolic acids. Now you're bringing your blood acidity down. That could cause all kinds of health problems. Yeah. So in other words, that's where the theory of this alkalinity. Then they talk about cancers. If it's alkaline, the cancers can't spread and this kind of stuff. And that's just.
Basically, your point is the body controls the homeostasis of the pH so tightly. It's so tightly controlled. Exactly. That it's very difficult. I mean, if you're going to change the pH of your stomach, first of all, you're going to be taking something in like baking soda. It's going to change the pH of your stomach, which will make your stomach not work, by the way. Right. If it did work, the stomach wouldn't be working properly.
The stomach is supposed to be
acidic. So you just now caused the stomach to not, and then that will be dealt with in the homeostasis in the body. It's not going to go through the body and just become basic.
Exactly.
Yes, right. Yes. So I'm glad you said that. Thank you, Jerry. It's always a breath of fresh air to talk to you.
I will add, there is a bit of truth to that. I mentioned this in my article. Just to be complete, I want to tell you that when people get older, they tend to, what happens is the acidity, let's say, in muscles, so to speak, tend to go up a little bit for various reasons. And this has, unfortunately, a catabolic effect on muscles. We found if you give older people a alkalinizer, so for example, potassium bicarbonate, it actually reverses the catabolism in muscles. So in that sense, raising the alkalinity actually does have health benefits, but that's for a specific population though. Generally speaking, people don't have to mess with, but one of the main values of eating fruits and vegetables is they are alkaline foods.
Yeah, but
what they do is they balance out, unfortunately, protein foods tend to be acid foods, because what are proteins? Amino acids, acid. Yes. They're acids, right? Yeah. So the way nature designed the human body is you want to have your protein foods, which are acids, but if you balance it out with your fruits and vegetables, which are alkaline, everything is hunky-dory. Everything.
But now we're not making sense. Now we're saying that you can change the pH level of the body, but it's not useful to change unless you're in a pathologic condition.
Right, it's true. But in other words, generally speaking, let's put it this way. It kind of takes the burden off the body. In other words, if you could do it through your food intake, in other words, your body's going to do it anyway, but it makes it easier for the body. Less bicarbonate has to be produced in the kidneys. It kind of like makes it easier if you take in foods that are alkaline, that'll kind of reduce the acidity. Your body's going to do it anyway, because if it doesn't, you die. If you go, if the acidosis gets bad, you're dead.
I've read your article on this, actually. I think I'm going to do a detailed study and maybe an experiment on myself so I can determine for sure. So I'm not, just speculating. But thank you, Jerry. It's really a breath of fresh air. Every time I talk to you, I really enjoy it. And let's do something in the next 2 weeks, because I've already prepared the questions. So we'll just continue. So it'd be just easy. Right. You okay with that? All right. Great. Thank you so much. Hey, have a great night. By the way, how's West LA doing? Is it safe there? How's the homeless encampments and everything?
It's increasing. Unfortunately, this pandemic, unfortunately, has had a really bad effect on the situation, because, I walk my dog around here, and I can tell you, I've never seen so many for rent signs in all the years. I've lived in this area for 30 years. I everywhere I'm seeing for rent, because people are so low on money, they can't even afford the rent. A number of dozens and dozens of small businesses have closed down, all related to this pandemic thing. of now not allowing businesses to be open. And of course, the gyms being shut. Now they're opening up the Gold's Gym. They now have an outdoor area.
Really?
They turn the front parking lot into an outdoor area. You have to wear a mask. So the gyms are gradually open up. But even without the gyms open, people don't exercise, especially if you're over 40, your health trajectory is going to go like that.
Gary, that's the thing. People are not accounting for that. The general health level in the US for people who are not getting COVID is tremendously worse. And people dealing with depression and anxiety and loneliness. And that's one of the reasons I do these podcasts, because people are lonely, you know?
It's funny because I just real fast, I mean, you know about these COVID vaccinations, right?
Yeah, I haven't read that much.
The Pfizer and the Moderna, they require 2 vaccinations separated by 21 to 28 days apart. Now, why is that? Because what happens is the first vaccination kind of sets up your immune system. In other words, your immune system now more or less recognizes the, let's say, spike thing on the virus, the spike structure. So in other words, it's kind of like set up to recognize it, right? You say, well, what is the, so I compare it to like taking a gun and cocking the trigger, but not pulling the trigger, right? The gun's prepared to shoot. The second, or what they call the booster injection, that now completely, that causes the situation set up by the first injection to react. So in other words, the body reacts. The bottom line, on the second injection, the body reacts exactly as if it only lasts for a day or two. It reacts just like you're exposed to the real virus. So people get symptoms like headaches, fatigue, sleepiness, muscle ache, the same thing you'd get if you got COVID, right?
That's what I got when I got COVID.
Here's the interesting thing, though. This is something that really got me curious. In reading the various reactions of people who already had the second shot, some of them say they felt nothing. Others said that they felt that they were dying for 2 days. They said, I feel good now, but I literally couldn't move. Wow. The nurse gave me my shot. I asked her, I said, do you have the 2 injections? She said, yes. I said, how did it go? The first one, she said, nothing. Second one, I was so tired, I had to lay down for a whole day.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, what is it that separates these people? Why is it that one group gets the second injection, hardly feels anything, and the other group is basically, it's almost like they had COVID for a day? What's the difference? I say it's the way your immune system is. In other words, my point is, this is only a theory on my part, strictly hypothetical. I say if you have a really good, healthy immune system that is, let's say, on the alert and ready to go, the second shot, you might get some minor, maybe a fever, slight headache, but that's about it. The people that have, let's say, the immune system is not up to par, they're going to get those COVID symptoms. This is my theory. I have not read this in any medical journal, nothing. It's strictly, but it's something I've noticed.
It's most likely true. I mean, I've had COVID for sure once, most likely twice. Yeah, for sure once. And the first time I was only able to know I had it because my wife had the breathing issues. And I noticed I had a joint pain. And I'm very, like whenever my inflammatory cytokines activate, I feel joint pain. So I knew something was going on. And then I had a little bit of depression for a week. I could just sense it. But my immune system is very active. So I've never been afraid of it. But the problem is my wife's pregnant now. So I literally don't go out. So I don't go out anywhere. I don't meet anyone because I don't want to risk my wife, you know?
What are your plans on the vaccination, Leo?
Well, I'll get the vaccine. I have to research which one, but I'll get the vaccination, of course.
I had the Pfizer one. I'm having the next one this Friday, which happens to be my birthday. I'm not very happy about that. because,
Happy birthday.
Yeah, I hate to have to, if I do get the bad, that's going to be a real drag. to be like, back on my back. I even bought this. I bought a thermometer. I didn't even have a thermometer. I bought this injection. But after I get the injection, if I see an elevated temperature, I know that I'm having the reaction. So.
Well, you're turning 21, Jerry. I wish you a very, very long life ahead of you. You really are, Jerry. I got to say, you really took care of your health very well. I know very few people like you. Yeah, it's incredible.
I try to. I'm at an age when I was a kid. I thought people my age were like 90% dead already. Yeah,
you're more active than people my age, to be honest, especially intellectually. Incredible. All right.
I'll tell you the one thing. I said I've lost a lot of muscle. I don't have the muscle mass I had before. You know what I mean? But I'll tell you one thing. God help me. If I can maintain my mental acuity and my intelligence and increase my intelligence, That's a gift from God, and that's all I ask. I'm happy.
Because that's what we are. We are our brains. The soul is the brain. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Jerry. We'll talk soon, within a couple of weeks, okay? All right, bye-bye. Bye-bye.